I think certain animals certainly are better pets than others. Rabbits, for example, are quite social. So I would, so there's certain countries that now have the law that if you have an animal that is a social animal, that you're actually not allowed to just buy one. You have to buy two.
Oh, is that right?
So
that's smart.
some things, that, cats are solitary typically. So for them, it's not a problem to be by themselves. But a dog is very social. If you work all day, for example, the dog is by itself all day long, kind of waits for that one short walk or whatever.
Yeah.
In some circumstances, it's better to have two dogs because they can keep each other company. But I think you really have to decide whether you have the time and the patience and the knowledge to have a pet.
Can it be expected for a social animal that maybe is, like you say, alone for most of the day to act out detrimentally if they don't have that partner with them all day type thing?
Well, I guess they would be, lonely and kind of bored a good part of the day, but they also will bond with their owner. Obviously, they will be kind of a replacement for their peers. So I wouldn't say necessarily that you shouldn't have a dog if you're not around all the time, but you definitely, when you're around, you have to, play with it, go for longer walks, not just let it into the backyard to do its business and things like that.
Yeah. Well, you can both weigh in on this next one. Aggressive dogs. I mean, clearly we hear reports of aggressive dogs all the time. It's going to happen. Do we think that's primarily due to the breed of the dog, or is this the environmental condition in which the dog is living?
In my opinion, it's a lot to do with the owner. How it's brought up. There isn't an aggressive breed of dog. There are bad owners that don't socialize their animals, that don't exercise their animals, that don't enrich their animals, and so certain breeds do get a bad rap in the media. But the wrong types of people are attracted to these breeds. So it's an
interesting point. Pit bulls comes to mind, for example. Not to say that all pit bull owners are bad people.
No, not all, but certain types are attracted to breeds, and probably for the wrong reasons. Not necessarily for the traits of the breed as much as the symbolism of having a tough dog. But you see many pit bulls that are great pets, great family pets, and
also,
they can be extremely social, and they can live with families with no problems. But you're not reading about those ones in the media.
That's the same thing, though, right? It's always the bad news, isn't it? Which is unfortunate. Which is, I think it's important to have these discussions.
Right,
folks. We're going to jump to another quick break and check in with the Rant Pack. Stay with us.
I think when it comes to animal cruelty, on a provincial level, we need to adopt more of a zero tolerance policy. It needs to be a balance of emotion and logic, and we need to start influencing, the right politicians to really make a difference on a provincial level, to implement mandatory jail time, to make this bigger than you just get a slap on the wrist and a fine, and you can no longer own an animal, especially considering a lot of people who do this didn't own the animal to begin with. So I think provincially we need to toughen up. It's the only way.
I want to talk a little bit about the Gazoo Animal Farm in Three Hills. Again, it was a big one in the media. A lot of horrific pictures, frankly, came out from Gazoo. Although I was talking with a co-worker, and he had mentioned that this gentleman, I think his name was Len Gustafson, was actually trying to do a good thing, he thought. He thought that, without that animal farm having been in existence, these animals would essentially be destined for, to be euthanized. Regardless. Is there a moral debate with a place like Gazoo?
I won't speak specifically to Gazoo because I've never been there and it's not within my jurisdiction. But generally speaking, the argument against euthanasia, I would argue that in some cases euthanasia would be more humane than being kept in neglectful conditions where you're not fed appropriate food, where you're not enclosed properly, where you're exposed to other species that you wouldn't normally. But again, I can't speak specifically to Gazoo.
What's your opinion on that, Kathleen?
I would share his opinion. I think depending on the conditions, sometimes it would be better to relieve that animal of its suffering instead of, being merely kept alive. So it really depends. But I don't know that circumstance either. So I haven't been there.
I mean, it's a tough one. I think that, there was a lot of animals there that were, I know it's not a popular belief, but I think there were a few animals there that were cared for adequately. Of course, again, with social media and the way that papers can work in general, it is the bad news that gets out first and foremost. I can't help but think that, maybe there is somewhat of a moral debate there. Either way, it sounds like those farms probably won't be in existence for too much longer. I believe he's grandfathered in. After that, it's not the case. Like you said, exotic animals, they don't belong in captivity, especially when they can't be cared for in that regard. Do exotic animals belong anywhere outside of the wild and a major metropolitan zoo?
I think I would say mostly no, they don't belong into,
Snakes comes to mind. A lot of people own snakes.
Yeah,
It seems like an odd pet
yeah.
to me personally.
Yeah.
Your
Yeah.
thoughts?
Well, again, I think it depends on the biology of that species. So let's say cockatoos, or other, birds. They're highly social, yet they're kept as individuals, by some owner for 30, 40, 50 years because they live that long.
Yeah.
And I think there must be quite a bit of suffering in these animals because they're very social. They're kind of trying to bond with the owner again, but it's certainly not something that I would ever do. I think it's, if you have some animals that you can adequately look for, you can kind of create a similar social environment for them, and you play with them, you do other things, then yes.
Interact,
but
yeah.
But a lot of the exotic species, again, we don't know much about their behavior. We might not be able to care for them adequately. Snakes in particular, I don't know. I don't know
I
too
don't
much
get the
about,
bird thing
so.
though either. I mean, you're taking
Yeah.
an animal that has the ability to fly,
Yeah.
which we'd all just love to have the ability to fly, let's be honest, and we're going to put it in a cage for our amusement. I mean, not officially speaking, but your opinion. I mean, is that the right thing to do with a bird?
You want pet ownership to be something that's mutually beneficial,
Yeah,
right? So,
right.
The owner gets the companionship and whatever they're looking for out of an animal, and the animal gets the same thing. The socialization, enrichment, accompaniment, that sort of thing. So certainly with birds, you see that they can enjoy their owners, and if they're taken care of properly. But you do also want to see animals be able to do what they're
Meant to
naturally
do,
able
right?
to do in the wild too. So it's kind of a trade-off, and I would caution anybody who's going to get a pet, whether it's exotic, whether it's a dog or cat, to do your homework, be prepared to meet the needs of that animal, and be prepared for any medical concerns in the future financially.
Okay, so if a neighbor is observing what they deem to be abuse, and I mean, clearly there's, like you mentioned, neglect. If a dog's outside all night in the cold, would be a few of them. The dog in the hot car for an extended period of time. What's the best recourse? I mean, what should a citizen do to report that? Is there a number that needs to be called? Is there guys on Twitter? I mean, the phone number.
As far as in Calgary, call it into the Calgary Humane Society. If it's something that's happening after hours that needs to be dealt with immediately, the Calgary Police have the authorities that we do as well. So between us and the police, and our dispatch number is 403-205-4455, and then the non-emergency police is 403-266-1234. Those are the numbers to call when it comes to these sorts of things. And I can say that when they're called into the Humane Society, if there's reasonable and probable grounds to believe that there's an offense under the Animal Protection Act and that animal is being caused to be in distress of any sort, we will absolutely investigate. And if it requires removal of the animal, we'll do that.
That's perfect. I mean, you guys have been doing a great job as a citizen. Thanks
Thank
a
you.
lot for doing what you guys are doing, and hopefully, the word will get out. It's, it's definitely a battle that you're fighting.
No doubt.
Guys, I want to thank you both for being here. Catherine, thanks very much for joining me.
You're welcome.
Brad as well.
Thanks for having us.
Folks, that's all the time we have for this evening. I hope it was an informative discussion. By all means, if you want to shoot us a topic discussion, something that we need to touch on, that's on your mind, that you're passionate about, don't be a stranger. We're on Facebook as well as Twitter. We're back next week. Take care.